Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this little explanatory video on a very old computer game which is quite dear to me, namely Shannara for MS-DOS. Shannara is a computer game by US game developer Legend Entertainment. The adventure game is based on the Shannara cycle by US fantasy author Terry Brooks. It was released in 1995 for personal computers and MS-DOS. Shannara is set in the Four Lands, the post-apocalyptic fantasy world of the novel. Shay Ohmsford from the Shady Vale region once defeated the evil wizard Brona with the help of the legendary Sword of Shannara, and now lives a peaceful life as an innkeeper in the village of Shady Vale. Brona's spirit, however, has been summoned and seeks revenge on those who once opposed him. To do so, he has assembled an army of monsters and is now moving against Shady Vale and neighboring Ley. The player takes over the role of Jack Ohmsford, Shay Ohmsford's son. The latter sees Jack as his successor as an innkeeper, but the boy would much rather have adventures, which is just as classic as it gets. Let's look at the story and the writing of the game. The druid Alanon, an old friend of Shay, meets Jack outside of Shady Vale and informs him about the impending danger. While Alanon wants to warn Shay and urge him to organize the defense of Shady Vale, Jack is to warn Prince Menyon of Ley. From the king he gets the order to search for the Sword of Shannara in the northwestern fortress of Tursis, because only with the help of his sword Brona can be stopped. Jack is assisted by Shella, Menyon Ley's daughter, who accompanies him. Jack finds the sword, but it is destroyed and must be magically charged with the help of 4 artifacts in order to use it. These artifacts are scattered across the 4 enemy empires, the 4 lands of elves, gnomes, humans and dwarves. Jack must unite the races in order to obtain the artifacts to fight and ultimately defeat the warlock Lord Brona. Although Legend Entertainment had experienced writers on its own in Bob Bates and Steve Moretsky, the company sought external writers to create the script. Bates used his contacts with Corey and Lorian Cole, who had been responsible for the Quest for Glory games for Sierra, which were adventure games with role-playing elements just like the Shannara adventures. In terms of content, the computer game is located between the first 2 books of the Sword of Shannara trilogy. Terry Brooks initially expressed concern about whether the script would fit in well with his Shannara cosmos, but was satisfied with the work of the Coles in the end. Shannara is a 2D point-and-click adventure. It marks a transition from the text adventures that were common in the 1980s to graphics adventures, in which the game is presented in text form and is accompanied by graphics. The largest part of the screen is occupied by gorgeously hand-drawn, partly animated pictures in SVGA resolution, which illustrate the respective locations of the game world. The background and character art was mainly done by artist Douglas Herring, who also was the art director on Age of Empires and Age of Empires 2, amongst many other games. The game's screens represent the events from the ego perspective. That means the player characters themselves are not to be seen. The game's events are described in a text window. The controls and the player's inventory are located at the bottom and the right edge of the screen. Interaction with the game world takes place with the help of these control elements. The player selects an object in the main window or in the inventory by clicking on it, whereupon context-sensitive commands are provided to apply to the object. It may be necessary to select another object, which is then used in combination with the first object. Navigation and traveling is done by the player maneuvering the game character over a 2-dimensional map of the game world. Intermediate sequences, which often depict events taking place parallel to the player's actions, are rendered in render videos. In a digital diary, the game keeps track of what the player has experienced so far, so that the player can get an overview of the events and his current tasks at any time. The story of Shannara is mostly linear. The game world is divided into locations, which have to be explored in a fixed order and each of which comprises a few rooms or outside areas. At each location, tasks have to be completed and puzzles have to be solved before the player can travel to the next location. A return to already visited places does not take place.
You may not disturb His Majesty unless you are invited to do so.
Now, what actually is Shannara? The game is no classical RPG, it is an adventure, but it contains several role-playing elements, similar to other heavily scripted adventures which more or less pretend to be role-playing games. Exemplary for RPG elements in Shannara is your party. Up to 5 NPCs will join the player, which then become player characters, so that a diverse party of characters is formed over the course of the game, just like it is, for example, in pen and paper. In addition, the game is regularly interrupted, especially when maneuvering over the map. Then turn-based combat interludes take place if you are not careful and run into monsters. It is comparable a little bit to walking into the tall grass in Pokémon. In combat, the player selects one action for each member of his group per combat round, and the AI does the same for the computer opponents. Winning random fights is irrelevant to the main storyline and unfortunately has no effect on the rest of the game. There is no loot or experience points to be gained. However, lost fights can be restarted as often as the player pleases. Outside the fights, instead of performing actions as Jack, the player can assign other characters in his group to act. In one example, Shella has to gather a mistletoe from a tree because she is the most able party member to do so. Brendel and Jack are simply too heavy for the task. The tree would give and everything would be terrible. In another example, your dwarven companion Brendel carves one of your diary sketches into a piece of wood, since he is a much better carver than you are. Only cooperation, thinking outside of the box, and using your party members' skills will make you achieve your goals. All the members of the party have different characteristics and abilities. Some are strong, some are swift, some are smart. The player can even talk to his party members in order to hear their opinion or even advice on how to proceed. The voice acting is pretty much refined for this era, both in the English and in the elusive German version of the game. My opinion on Shannara is first and foremost that it is gorgeous. If you like well done and inspiring fantasy settings, cozy and imaginative places and the odd scary or confounded spot, then this game is for you. The riddles are mostly logical and fair, and solving them gives the player a great sense of accomplishment. When you finally figure out which items to combine in your inventory or which action to use on what object on the screen in order to advance, the typical point-and-click dopamine rush is there. Anyone who ever played and loved such adventures, for example the Monkey Island series, knows what I'm talking about when I say that solving a puzzle feels great. A big difference to the Monkey Island series, however, is that you can actually die in this game a lot. So do save often. Sometimes death comes really unexpected. Well then, check it out. I will put a link to the game on archive.org in the description, and well, see you around.
Stop! We kill you dead!